Alright, in part one we concentrated on the screw and a little bit on making the tap, but there's another part that goes along with the tap, and that's the guide block. And what I have here, my tap has a 7/8 diameter, and I've bored a 7/8 hole through about a roughly 2-inch thick piece of hard maple, and it's just a really close fit, which is what I want. But the spiral that I sawed into the tap has to engage something, so what we're going to do is take a piece of steel and I'm going to embed it in this block at the correct angle so that it protrudes down into the hole. It'll be shaped, rounded once it's in there, so it'll engage these threads and pull the tap through the piece that I'm going to actually cut the threads in. So the way I did that is in my CAD program. I laid out a line. The length of this line is the circumference of my 7/8 dowel, and I knew I had 4 threads per inch, so each of these spacings is 1/4 inch, and we went from nothing on this end to a 1/4 inch on this end, so that's the thread pitch laid out flat. The next thing I did was I went ahead and extended that. Instead of just going the circumference, I extended it on beyond to a 5-inch length, because that's how long my block was. I took that pattern, laid it out on my block, and then figured out which one of these lines was approximately in the center of the block with depth ways, and then put a knife mark at each end of it, and then I just scribed a knife line along that angle. So that's the angle that plate will have to go in there. And what I'll do is I'll use the same saw that I used to cut this curve to cut down through this about, I'm thinking somewhere around 1/3 of the way or so deep through this hole. And then I'll take a piece of steel plate I found at the lumber yard, and we'll stick that in there and use that for our I guess nut in this case, where it'll engage those thread curves. I found these plates, they're some kind of connector plate you use in construction, at the lumber yard, and they were exactly 30 thousandths thick, and that's exactly what my saw kerf was. They were 5 inches long and a little over 1 3/4 wide, so they're just perfect for this. That never happens. I never find something quite that exact. So I think this is going to work out great. They do have some holes in them, and they were punched, so I went ahead and ran it on my diamond coarse stone to take the burrs off of it so it won't get jammed in there. Because once I put this in, I'll go ahead and mark the circle on it, take it back out, mark another circle inside of that that's maybe 3/16, because that's about how deep my saw kerf is, and I'll file this out round so that it'll engage as much of that tap as possible. Before I saw my block, I went ahead and, like I said, I put a pretty deep knife line along that angle that I want to saw. I don't know if you can see it there. It might be a little too much. There it is. And what I'm going to do is take a sharp chisel and bevel that a little bit on one side. So I'm just going to come in here from the side I'm going to want the saw to run on. And take a little piece out of there. And that'll give me a straight side on the left side and a little bit of a bevel on the right, but a place for my saw teeth to drop into and keep me on track so I get a real accurate cut. So I'll just go along here and take that out. I may deepen that a little bit afterwards before I start the saw. kerf cut, and I'll take my plate, slide it down in there. Till it bottoms out. And it's just a little less than halfway, if you can see it there, halfway through the hole. I think that'll probably be good. Take a marker and mark around the top of the metal so I'll know where the hole is. Alright, just tape my plate onto a scrap piece of plywood so it can't move, and I've marked a center here that coincides with the outside of this line, because I knew that the radius was 7/16, so I just set my caliper to 7/16 and just got it to line up with that. And what I'll do now is reduce it by 3/16, and I can get a concentric circle drawn inside there, and I'll file down to that. Okay, and there you can see I've got my line to file this down to. Well, after a little bit of trial and error, I finally got this thing fitted up to where it seems to work pretty good with the threaded tap. It's probably closer to 3/32 of exposed steel inside the hole than 3/16. It was just a little bit too tight, too much of a bind when I had it longer than that. So I'll put a couple of pins in this to hold the blade in place, and then we'll go on. Okay, once I got the blade in place, I went ahead and drilled some 5/16 holes all the way through, and just going to drive in some dowels to hold the blade where it belongs. I guess I shouldn't call that a blade, it's just a guide for the tap, but alright, with the guide clamped in the vise here, let's go ahead and run the tap through here so you can see that it does thread. It's a little snug. It's not really binding in there, but it does make a little noise. I may put a little oil on it to make it a little smoother. Well, I cut off the pins so they're more flush and not exposed. And I also took the blade out, or the plate out, and sawed it and then filed it flush after I put it back in and pinned it, so it won't be dangerous or sharp. So at this point I think I'm ready to heat treat the cutter, and after that I think we'll be about ready to make threads.
This time, and all you wanted was a man that could help you, baby, but I can't help it all. No, I tried the best I
Well, I've got everything clamped together here, and I made a couple of passes. I just put a little bit of vegetable oil in here for lubrication, and I really haven't put a T-bar on it yet. I've just been turning it by hand, and it's working pretty well. they've still got a little ways to go, but they're definitely taking shape. So I'll just keep pecking away at it until I get a clean thread and I can test it for fit. Well, I threaded a couple of test nuts, and the first one right here, as you can see, spins on pretty easily. Well, get started. And works just great. It does have a little bit more slop in it than I was hoping for. The problem I had was there was a defect in my screw in the lumber. There was a little split on the end here, and it made this first couple of threads bulge out on one side just enough that as I was running the tap through, and I'd stop and I'd test the fit, and it wouldn't want to start, and I kept going a little bit more until it finally would go through. It was really tight, but once I got past the first couple of threads, then it was too loose. So I realized what the problem was, and I cut the end of the screw off. So on the second one I tapped, I was able to get a little bit closer fit. Now this one, you know, it'll spin half a turn or so, and it's got just very, very little play, but it's got enough clearance. It'll turn easily, but no slop. So I'm a lot happier with this one. Now, what I did notice was it's been a couple days since I cut these threads, and when I came out today to shoot the video, this was fitting really tight. After a couple days of sitting here, it was really snug to thread on there, and so I decided I'd try and set the tap back up in it, and it turned out that was a pretty easy process. I still had the cutter set for the same depth as I'd finished this with, so I just got it lined up, ran it through there a couple times just to clean up a little bit, and it was perfect. So something to think about. If you make your threads really a close fit, you may want to leave your cutter set so you can go back through them in a couple days and clean them up. The other thing I did on this second one was I used a lot more oil on mostly on the end grain of the part. So when I ran the cutter through there, it went a lot smoother, it cut a lot better, went faster. Now I did use vegetable oil, which I probably won't do on my parts that I'm going to keep. Vegetable oil can turn rancid after a while and it might smell. I'll probably use linseed oil or something like that as my lubricant. And I just put it on a little acid brush and dab it down into the end grain on both ends. And really on the straight grain it doesn't even need it, but it'll carry a little bit around with the cutter. So yeah, they worked out great. Here's a close-up. You can see the quality of the threads are really good. There was no tear out, just a little bit of fuzz on some of the end grain, but not enough to affect the function of the thread. They're nice and sharp, and just I'm really impressed with them. I couldn't imagine that they'd come out as well as they have. So definitely a good sharp cutter, but it worked great. One last thing I'd like to mention is I acquired the information to build the tap from another YouTube account called Mr. Carter's account, and I've posted the link down in the description below. So there's a series of very detailed explanation and tutorial on how to make the tap and the die. So you don't need a CNC to cut your screw. You can do it with a router and this manual thread box, and it looks like a pretty slick setup. I of course used my CNC because I had one, but the tap was all a manual deal, so it's again very easy to follow instructions and very well done. So if you get a chance, you might want to check it out.
And all you wanted was a man.